Right, here we are about a fortnight since the last video, looking in the large greenhouse. First plants you see here are the latest sowing of cauliflowers. They've actually can go out of here today. We've put some plants out in the garden now, so the cold frame has space in, and they're a bit too warm in here, so these ones will be moved up later on into the cold frame. Plants you see at the back here are just some spare courgettes and marrows. We've already put the plants out, which you'll see as we continue around the garden that we want. Next sowing there of some cauliflowers and some calabrese. So that's following on. We usually sow about once a fortnight cauliflowers this time of year in batches of about 15 to cover the particular shows as we go through the year. Got some runner beans here. These were sown on Monday and are usual form in the 12 wholesale trays, and as you can see they're just starting to push up, so no doubt there's a root formed underneath there already. But we have had quite a nice warm week here, and although we've had to ventilate because it's been a bit too warm in here for some things, obviously the warmth has helped them come up quickly. At the back there we've just got some begonias that we've been playing around with. We saved some of the corms that they made last year and then cut them as it suggests in the books and planted them in little pots. Some are quite vigorous, some aren't. We'll probably get round to putting a few of those out in the garden. And then at the front here we've got some French beans. Again, you can see a little bit spasmodic how they're coming up at the moment. Peas. These are some Flavora that we're trying. We haven't grown any Show Perfection this year. We do normally grow Show Perfection for the shows, but the only show, if at all, that we ever get to show them at would be the RHS Tatton Park first summer fruit and veg competition, and then around here we get blasted with mould, so we don't get any peas after July. So we're just growing these just to eat. There's some that John Trim said taste nice, so we thought we'd give them a try. Some little lettuces there, some little gem. Again, we like little gem for our salads during the summer, and we just grow successions of those, different sowings. You'll see again when you go in the polytunnel there's some in there, although they are suffering now because it's too hot in there. We're harvesting at the moment, and then there are already a couple of batches out in the garden as we go round. In the baskets here we've got some tumbling toms. We find these are quite a nice little cherry type tomato. Something we only really tried, we'd never heard of them. A couple of years ago I think we got a free packet of seed, and as like all gardeners you tend to think, well, you might as well make use of them and try them. I personally think they look very scruffy things, even from when they're very small. They're just very scruffy looking, massive stalks and stems and leaves, and later on though loads of fruit, and so we've continued to just pot up a few for our use, and they grow quite happily either in a basket or in a tub, so quite handy for anybody with a small garden or lack of space as a alternative to Gardener's Delight. Squashes, again, those are just some spare plants. I expect somebody will come along that will make use of them hopefully in the next week or so, because again they desperately need to go out. Cucumbers, we've got some Burt Plus Tasty Green here, and these are some again that we grow mostly for eating, because the Carmen we do eat, but obviously we're cutting down a lot on how many fruit they produce to get them for showing, so to have enough for our salads we grow the Burt Plus Tasty Green. And then we've got some more sowings of those. This one here looks quite pathetic because not quite sure what Fred did, but this was coming up with a cauliflower plant that he put out in the week, Obviously perhaps he thought the compost wasn't going to produce a plant, so put something else in there, only to find that both things come up. And then right at the back corner we've got the geraniums ready to go out in our bed in the middle of the drive once I've taken up the primulas. Right, we've come from the big greenhouse now into the polytunnel beside it, and this is the first sowing of little gems that I was talking about when we were in the greenhouse. You can see they are even getting a little bit over the top now, so I'll probably have a couple of those for lunch today. It doesn't help that it's too warm in here now for them, but it was an ideal place during the colder weather when they were put out. Then we come to a couple more tomatoes, and these are some Alicante. So this is your what I call salad tomatoes in tubs, and they again will be going outside today because we've had the doors at either end of the polytunnel open every day for weeks now, so most of the plants are well hardened off, and hopefully the end of May we're not going to get any frosts. This is a Nimbus, a variety called Nimbus, which was a trial packet of seeds we had this year, so again we're just trying it to see what we think of it. Again in a tub, so that will go outside with the others. This is the last of our earlies that we planted in tubs, and it's an international kidney, and we'll probably have that with some roast lamb tomorrow, Bank Holiday Monday. And then we come to some more of the tumbling toms. These ones, rather than in a basket, which will be hung up around the garden outside the garage, these ones are in a tub, and we'll find that we'll have to put that tub on top of another upturned tub, because they do literally cascade right down, and if they're not high enough up they'll be trailing all over the floor as well. We're checking the 250 gram onions now that we've been watching, and they've been measured continually. These were overwintered, if you recall, and put in pots in the polytunnel. This one in particular was 8.5 inches, now it's 9 inches.
So now coming out of the polytunnel, Mum's just having a look at the pickling shallots.
Just checking over the ones that we grow, as we always have done, in the 5-inch pots for showing. And if you remember last time they had some attention, they were just eased apart so that we get a better shape. And usually the bank holiday weekend or the end of May is when we might start harvesting. So just, if we think one's getting near the size, slide the ring over, taking care not to damage the bulb, and then you can just slide it back up the leaves, or down the leaves in the first place and up the leaves, just to see whether they're getting near to size. So this is how we normally grow the shallots, in the 5-inch pots, as we have done for years for our showing pickling shallots. Then, because we wanted to get some more stock this year, we had just got some of the smaller bulbs from when we were sowing them in these 15s. Now, we did have a conversation with Marcus the other week about whether these in small pots like this would come up to size for showing. At the time these were looking a bit overcrowded. Most had about 4 to each pot, so they were thinned out. Although we were originally just growing them for stock, we thought we would just experiment and see what size they did come up to. Some of the ones that were thinned off of them, because we didn't think that they would maintain 4 shallots in these little pots and get a nice shape, were eaten, and some that we didn't eat of the thinnings we put into this pot, which again will just grow on, come up to size, and either get pickled later in the year or used for the stock bulbs next year.
We planted out our overwintering leeks yesterday, so these ones aren't grown for show, they're just purely for eating over the winter months when there's not a lot else left in the garden. There were 4 different varieties that we wrote about on our diary earlier in the year. We've got the Lancaster here, so you can see their pot at the front here, and then the ones that we planted out in 2 rows yesterday. And then coming across the 2 rows to the right, we've got Autumn Neptune, which is a variety we haven't grown before, but John Trim suggested this one because this is his favourite eating leek. Now when we plant these out, we tip them out of their pots, we separate the leeks out, and then we will trim their roots to about 1 inch or 1.5 inches long, and we also trim a little bit of their leaves if they've got longer flags than any of the others. This is mainly just to stop them blowing around in the wind once they're dropped in their hole. And then we just dibber a hole, or yesterday we actually used a metal bar to make the hole, and then just drop the leek into the bottom, make sure it goes right down to the bottom, and then to settle them in we just fill each hole up with water from a watering can, just go along the row doing that, and that just settles some of the smaller bits of soil around the base of the plant so that the roots are covered, but you just need to make sure that you don't fully fill the hole in. All that will happen is, now that each leek has its hole, it will just self-blanch in the hole. The other 2 varieties that we're growing, we've got some Snowdon leeks here, which is a Tozer's variety, and then on the end here we've got some John Soulsby's leeks. We've been growing these for about 10 years now, and this one is a very, very sweet leek to eat. The tomatoes in the polytunnel, like Mum said earlier, will be going out later today, up near the garage, but these ones we put out yesterday just behind the fence down the bottom of the garden. We've got a Nimbus here, and then we've got 2 Gardener's Delight, the cherry variety, and then we've got an Alicante on the end here. They do quite well behind the fence here, just because they have that little bit of protection, because sometimes, because we're living on a hill, it can be quite windy in the garden, so the fence does help them to stay protected, and they've got a cane that they can grow up, so they'll be tied up that to keep them supported as they keep growing. Here we have the marrows and courgettes and squashes planted out. So we've firstly got 2 rows of 4 courgettes here, and we tend to grow Cora these days. We find it's very nice tasting, very nice dark green uniform courgette. And then we've got, in the other 2 rows, we've got 6 marrow plants, which will be Bush Baby. And then on the end of the last row, on either end, we've just got a butternut squash Hunter, another Tozer's variety, but very nice butternut squash. We've also got a few more salad crops planted out here. So in the foreground you've got Little Gem lettuce. They're fine to grow outside now, this time of year they'll grow fine. Then we've got Boltarty beetroot. Like the others we've spoken about, these were grown in cell trays to start them off, and then just planted out in the garden this week. And then at the back we've got some Paris Market carrots, which are just the little round carrots. We find that our ground, albeit that we have dug lots of things into it over the years to try and make it nice for crops to grow in, it is still rather clayey and quite large clumps of soil. So we find that we can't that successfully grow carrots just straight in the soil if we were to just dig a trench for them. So we tend to start the Paris Market off in the cell trays, and because they're round carrots, we find that they grow fine. They don't hit stones or big clods of soil and fork. So they seem to grow better than sort of your conventional carrot shape in our soil. You can see they're just covered with a cage at the moment. This is just to stop things like pigeons, or if a rabbit happened to get in here, or we do have some of our neighbours' cats do like to have a wander around, so it's just to deter them really from going in there. Here we have some more of the John Soulsby's leeks. So instead of being treated like the others, where there were lots of leek plants put in the 6-inch pot, these were actually planted into the deep pots as if you were to grow them for exhibition. We won't actually do that. We don't have that much success with the exhibition leeks. However, we have just put them in pipes in the garden, just with a meta post up the side to give them a bit of support, and we'll just see how these get on. Further down in this bed we've got the latest lot of cauliflowers and some broccoli that we planted out yesterday. So once again we've got 2 rows of each of our main varieties. We've got Boris, Cornell and Raleigh, and then right down the end we've got some Marathon broccoli, which is probably our favourite variety of broccoli. It grows lovely great big heads when it first forms, and then it grows lots of shoots afterwards, so well worth growing if you haven't tried it before. Then at the end of the next bed we've got the second lot of runner beans, and then just in the foreground here we've got 1 lot of the potatoes. And as we span round the garden you can see the other lots are all up quite high as well now. And then right by my feet here we've got the parsnips, so they're still under clotches at the moment. But as you can see they've all pretty much germinated now. There are a few holes here and there where there's a miss, but we do put 3 seeds in each station in the hope that we don't get too many misses. These are getting up to the size really now that we could be thinning them out to 1, and that will probably be done in the next week or so, and then the clotches will be taken off and they'll just be left to the elements. We've got a couple of varieties in here. One of these is Gladiator. But Frank, you'll have to remember to sow your parsnips this year, or come winter time you'll probably find that you're jealous of the parsnips that we're harvesting, like you were last year. Here we've got the first lot of runner beans. They've still got their plastic round at the moment, but as you can see they are starting to get up their canes now, and really, providing we don't get any more frosts, which hopefully we won't now we're getting towards the end of May, the plastic should be able to come off, and really they just need a good weed. And also some of them, as you can see, are kind of a bit wayward from their canes, so we'll just need to sort of persuade them to go up their canes just by wrapping them round there anti-clockwise, and eventually they will learn that it's the cane or nothing. And then we've got some more potatoes here. As you can see, they're over there discussing the potatoes. They spend an awful lot of time doing this. And you've got the other batches of potatoes coming up this bed.
Fred and I have just been discussing the potatoes. I'm stood here now by what we call the earlies, so that's the 4 rows that went in the middle of March, sat in the polytunnel for a couple of weeks, and then came out into the garden at the end of March. You can see how they're progressing now. And then going up the bed next to them is a block of Winston. And obviously as you look around the garden you've seen some of the blocks of the other varieties that will grow in bags. Just checking them really to see how they're doing. Most of these have got flowers on now apart from the Winston. And the supports that were put on probably about 3 weeks ago now, as you can see, are completely disappearing. That's why it's important to put them on whilst the plants are still small. You can A, get round them to do it, and B, if you leave it too long you won't get them on anyway. But I think these need a water today. I'll probably water these earlies, and then 3 batches of the main sowing, the Winston, the Kestrel, and the far bed 3, where there's some more Winston.
Here we've got another batch of the salad crops. As you can see, These ones are much larger. These were sown a little bit earlier than the ones we saw in the first bed just now. Again, same varieties, Boltardy, Paris Market and Little Gem. It won't be long now before the Little Gem will be ready. The beetroot will be a little bit longer, unfortunately, because I do really like a beetroot in a salad. And probably the carrots will be a little while longer now, but we'll be eating the Little Gems soon enough. Here you can see our first batch of cauliflowers and cabbages for the year. You can see they're coming along nicely now. We make sure we keep these watered. Cauliflowers can't really have enough water. It's surprising how much a plant like this can drink, and it's important, if you want to make a decent sized cauliflower, it's important to have the framework and the plant there to begin with, otherwise the chances of getting that cauliflower are pretty slim. So we do always make sure we keep them well watered. Coming back up the garden now, we've got the carrots in the small greenhouse. So these are just continuing to grow. And you can see yesterday we put the collars on, just filled those with peat, and that just stops if the carrot pushes up as it starts to form a stump. The collar with the compost, or it's just peat in this case, just stops the top from greening, which would then render it so that it couldn't be shown. We've also got the stump carrot beds here. As you can see, these have got EnviroMesh all the way round just to stop, or try and stop, the carrot fly. And as you can see through there, the plants are just starting to come up. And like with the parsnips, it won't be long now until these are thinned down to one. This is our first sign of Carmen cucumbers, which have been planted out in the lean-to. These ones we'll mainly use for the early shows, because we do a second sowing later on, which will be planted out on the other side of the lean-to. As you can see, there's a little bit of fleece here on the floor. In a second we'll probably put that over the cucumbers, just because it's getting quite sunny here now today, and as the sun comes round on the lean-to, it does often burn the tips of the cucumbers, and they don't like the direct sunlight on them, so we normally cover with fleece just as a form of protection against the sun. On the other side of the greenhouse we've got the Burt Plus Tasty green cucumbers. So these are just in here to form some early cucumbers. As you can see here, they're just starting to form those, and these will actually be replaced by the second sowing of Carmen cucumbers in a few weeks' time. So we're just nipping out the tops now of the Burt Plus Tasty green, just to stop them sort of growing anymore, just so they start forming those cucumbers before they get replaced by the Carmen. So here we are, just nipping the top out of the other Burt Plus Tasty green in the other corner of the greenhouse, and as you can see, this one's getting some cucumbers on as well. A little bit bigger than the cucumbers on the plant at the other end. Maybe because this plant was a little bit further ahead to begin with, or maybe it's a slightly better position in the greenhouse, I don't know. And here we are, like I said, just pegging the fleece up over the Carmen cucumbers that are planted out, just to protect them from the sun. Otherwise it does get very, very warm in here. Here we've got the herb garden a couple of weeks on. So we've got the dill still growing down the side here, and then as you can see, as we move over the pots and the sinks, everything's just coming along nicely. Luckily the weather's been quite mild, so we didn't lose any, and so none needed to be replaced. The mint's just starting to come now. We're still taking pinching the tops out of this as it grows, as you can see, just to make it create a few more branches, and so it makes a bush rather than just the one stalk. And sage is starting to grow. And then we've got a lavender plant here. And then just round the back we've got a little bit of colour. We've got some French marigolds, a nice mix of yellows, oranges, and sort of a reddy orange kind of variegated flower. These will go out in one of the flower beds soon, but they just look like quite a nice block of colour there, just up against the garage at the moment, having a little bit of protection whilst also hardening off. And then you can see the Tumbling Tom tomatoes that Mum and Dad just brought up the garden. They're now situated on the garage where they'll stay until they've finished harvest.